Welcome to episode 8 of the Confused Millennial podcast. I'm Rachel, your host and the blogger behind theconfusedmillennial.com. I am so excited because today we have Paul Angone here. He is the author of the new book, 101 Questions You Need to Ask in Your 20s, and let's be honest, your 30s too. And he's the creator of allgrownup.com. Grown is spelled Groin because let's be honest, navigating your 20s can definitely make you want to groan a time or two. He is a sought-after millennial speaker and an organizational consultant. I look at him as like the millennial blogger OG. Like, people always say to me, you've been doing this for so long, but he's been doing this for over 7 years and has 3 books published now. One of his other really popular books, 101 Secrets for Your 20s, you guys can now pick up at Target. And I am so excited for this conversation because we get into all of the things from the quarter life crisis freak out, where you kind of probably have found yourself thinking, is this really it? Is this what I worked so hard for? And that kind of crushing anxiety and fear, to gaining clarity on your passions and values, to staying inspired, motivated, and celebrating all of the accomplishments along the way. Because I think as millennials, we have a tendency to achieve so much in such a short period of time and just kind of blow past that into the next goal or next achievement. We don't really take time to celebrate and build ourselves up with how far we've come. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Paul in because that's where all of the good stuff lies. Welcome to the show, Paul. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's an honor to be here.
So I consider you kind of like the OG millennial. I don't even want to call you like a blogger because you're so much more accomplished than just blogging, but did it start with allgrownup.com?
Yeah, well, I mean, before that was about, well, first of all, thank you. I love being called an OG. That might be a first for me. But, and I often think that surviving online, like staying somewhat relevant online, feels like dog years to me. Like it's like 1 year equals 7 years. Totally. Because it can feel so hard. But yeah, before All Grown Up was about 7 years actually of trying to write and publish a book.
Oh, really?
And doing it the old-fashioned way of trying to get a literary agent to try to get you in front of publishers, the book proposals, that whole thing. And then I kept getting rejected and turned down by every publisher around because they kept saying you had to build a platform in our audience. Prove it to us. Because I kept saying, well, there's this 20-something angst out there and people need to be talking about it. And the life after college is difficult. And I don't think there's enough books and I can't find a book about this. But they're like, you got to prove it. So that's when I started All Grown Up and actually launched it out of my master's degree that I was getting as well as kind of like my culmination project. I kind of tricked/persuaded my professors to let me do this website as like part of my capstone project of my master's program. And then that's where it started from there. And that was like 7 years ago now that I've been running All Grown Up.
Wow, that's brilliant though. It's funny that you say that too for anyone listening. I launched the blog because I knew what you found out, that you had to have an audience to sell a book to. So my whole 5-year plan was to do a book when I reach 5 years. So
yeah, that's smart.
Tip.
And I tell everybody that way, that learn from my mistakes, and it's so amazing now the tools that we have that we can connect with our audience. If anybody's looking to produce content or grow a business or whatever, that we can actually connect directly to our audience without having to go through some gatekeeper.
Exactly.
That says you're not worthy to come in and talk to people, and that's the way it's been for hundreds and hundreds of years, unless you stood on like the corner of your town and yelled loud enough. So it is an amazing thing, that we get to do this now.
Totally. And so even 7 years ago, you knew like this 20-something angst was a real thing. What would you say was like the lowest moment in your 20s, your quote unquote quarter life crisis, if you will, that started you down this road? Because I got to imagine as a little kid, you did not think you were going to grow up to become like the millennial OG.
No way. And honestly, even millennial wasn't a thing. I mean, that's how old this was. I mean, I'm an older millennial technically, but the whole millennial conversation wasn't popular yet. I was really, and that's why my books are called 101 Secrets to Your 20s or 101 Questions You Need to Ask in Your 20s, because that's really who I'm trying to help, is kind of a stage of life.
Yeah.
And I'm so passionate about that because I felt like such a failure, you're right. That's why this started for me, is because I felt like I'm just totally blowing this. I felt like I was going to climb all those steps after college and open up the door at the top, and there was going to be waiting my dream job and dream life and my passion and my purpose. And I think, like most of us, I opened that door at the top, and then I felt like I had ended up back in the basement. And there was a lot of dark halls and locked doors, and I had no idea what to do. And it's like, how does anybody know what to do? And then you end up in a cubicle doing some job you didn't know existed. Mm-hmm. And you start asking yourself, is this really it? Is this going to be my life? And that question just gnawed at me. Is this really it? Is this going to be? And I couldn't shake that question. So to answer your question about quarter life crisis and moments of rock bottom, I think I had 10 of them, 15 of them. It was kind of that ebb and flow where I feel like I'm making a little progress, and then bam, right back down again. So I had so many memories of that, of just feeling like, man, life is not turning out like it's supposed to.
Totally. And then at what point do you think that you had the light bulb moment of, okay, this gnawing feeling is like eating away at me. Is this it? Even as you said that, I had like the tightness in my chest as I remember those days of my 9-to-5 life. So at what point were you like, okay, this is the new path? Like, how did you see the signs? What sparked it all for you?
First of all, it was very personal to me. And that's why I even tell people now, sometimes your pain and your problems can be your greatest gift to finding your passion. Mm-hmm. And I think we think about finding your passion as this like sexy adventure, like it's driving the sports car around. It's these big billboard moments, and you're so excited to go to work. It doesn't even feel like work. And some of that can be true, but I think really your passion typically starts with a lot of pain and problems and frustration that are so real to you that you have to do something about it. It becomes something you cannot not do. And that's what it was for me. It became something I could not do. I had to write about this. And really it was personally for me, I had to write about it because I was trying to make sense of it in my own life. I was trying to define things and put it on paper and try to map out, okay, what do I do? How do you be successful in your 20s? And then I started seeing that there was a bigger need there as well. I started being the friend that would actually be honest and open up and say, I'm not doing great. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I'm doing. And then it was this amazing thing where I could see this person, a friend that I'm talking to, kind of give this sigh of relief.
Yes.
And be like, you know what? I'm struggling too. I didn't know other people were struggling. And then I started feeling like, man, I'm tapping in to something bigger here. Mm-hmm. This is a need. So I want to help people. And so that's really where it started. So it wasn't a money-making idea. It was I really want to help people, and I want to help myself.
Yes, I love that so much because, I think the question I typically avoid when people come to me and they're like, how do I get clarity on my passions? What's my path supposed to be? And I honestly, I avoid the clarity conversation at all costs because for me, it was just like, I was hysterically crying to my husband when I said, I'm just another confused millennial with no idea what I'm doing with my life. It was those moments of great agitation that really led to, okay, I'm fired up about this and I'm just going to go down this rabbit hole and maybe it's going to help people, but I just need to do this for myself right now, which I think a lot of people really focus on the money-making aspect today because that's the number one question I get. How do I make money from my blog? How do I make money from my Instagram? And they kind of forget, who are they trying to be to who? What do they need in their life right now?
Yeah, it's what I say in my new book, the finding your significant why. Mm-hmm. And we talk about why a lot now, with Simon Sinek's books and just this discussion of getting deeper. And really it starts with those questions of, why are you really in this? And if it is just to be famous, or to, get a ton of followers or a ton of money real fast, I think we quickly all realize that it doesn't happen as quickly as we thought it would, and that's why I often tell millennials, 20-somethings that our big dreams aren't the problem. We should have big dreams. It's the timeline of how quickly we think some of those big dreams are going to happen. That's the problem, because we think it's going to happen about 8 years sooner than it probably will. And that was my case. You know, it's kind of that old adage that it takes 10 years to create an overnight success. And I felt like that I was literally about that 10-year, and not that I was an overnight success, but to even get that traction of success. So you got to ask those why questions, and it's got to be deeper and rooted, I think, in your story, in your pain, in your values, in your skills and your strengths. You know, there's a lot of combination of elements here to figure out, okay, what is this why? Because when I fail, when nobody cares what I'm doing, when I get rejected by every publisher or every business, what is going to keep me going? And if it's just this illusion of, oh, everybody's going to be applauding me and cheering me on, you know, as we all realize pretty quickly, especially if you're living a life online, nobody really cares for a long time. And so it takes a long time.
There's so many things that you just said in that I want to go back and like unpack them all, because the 8-year timeline, like things are not going to happen on your timeline. That's something that I know I've struggled with. I know that a lot of people have struggled with in the values piece. So let's start with the timeline and then we'll work our way into the values. Because I know for me, you know, the blog is only 2 years old, and towards the second half of last year, it's not that I was upset with like how many people I had reached. I more than doubled how many people I had reached in the first year. I reached almost 300,000 people, which for a 2-year-old blog is great in my opinion.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
But even so, I was really starting to think about giving up and just throwing in the towel. And it's not that, you know, when I started the blog, I always had this 5-year timeline in mind for building up an audience and then going and trying to get the book deal. So it's not that I think the rationale was totally off. I just started getting bored. And so one of the questions that you ask in the book is, how do you keep doing inspiring work even when I'm feeling uninspired? And so I think with that timeline piece, it all kind of goes hand in hand. And so like, I know everyone has to answer these questions for themselves, but what advice do you have? Because you've been doing this for so many years now.
It is a tough question, and that's really where success happens, right? It's those thousands of mundane moments where you're either going to have to get up really early to write that blog, or you're going to have to go on your lunch break. You know, I remember, you know, while I was building most of this myself, like many of us, I was working a full-time job. And so I think there's even that illusion of, you know, we see friends that with the laptop on the beach, and they're trying to sell you on their course of how to travel abroad and make a living, you know, and they have all these sexy pictures again. But I think for most of us, you have to work really hard at your job, and you're working really hard at your dream. Again, it's going to take sacrifice. And so that's even a question I ask in that too. And I know you've asked yourself this as well, Rachel, this idea of, what am I willing to sacrifice? And what are some of my non-negotiables that I'm not willing to sacrifice? And even right there, you know, and for me, this dream of helping 20-somethings, of helping people going through transition, it became this non-negotiable. It became something I had to do again. So it was worth the sacrifices. There was definitely many times that I also wanted to quit, that I also wanted to give up. But I just had too much writing on this. It was just too much of myself. And I just felt like this is too important, because I gave up on a lot of other dreams. I mean, don't get me wrong. I gave up on other stuff. You know, like I wanted to be a sports broadcaster at one point. So I got an internship at CBS Sports in Burbank, California, you know, the big kind of mecca station. And I thought, oh man, I've arrived. I made it. And then I did that internship for a few months, and I started realizing that I hated talking about sports all day. I love sports, but there just wasn't enough in it for me. You know, I didn't have the significant why, and why do I care about sports this much to make it my entire life? And so I gave that dream up, and that was okay. You know, I'd cross that off the list, and that's why I even say, you know, that sometimes your 20s is about a game of emerging adult, you know, elimination. You know, that you're just crossing things off the list, and you're seeing what sticks and what means so much to you, that you're going to keep showing up. You're going to keep doing the inspired work, even when you don't feel the inspiration behind it. You know, you do the work first, and then the inspiration follows as you dive into it.
Definitely. And then what about like just periods of burnout, or just feeling like, because for 7 years to be going through all these secrets and all these questions and all these different things, after a while, like, do you ever get sick of hearing your own voice?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I definitely am like, do I have anything else to say? I'm constantly asking myself that, like, do I really have anything else to say? And so I think for all of us, we have to keep growing ourselves. I think that's what it comes down to. You have to keep reading and having good conversations with mentors and really feeding ourselves and going on hikes and meditating or praying, whatever it is that feeds your soul. I think that's a big part of it. Because if you're going to keep giving and keep trying to be that fire hose of information or inspiration or whatever it is, at some point you're going to feel dry. But also just continuing to grow the dream and to expand the reach and expand the possibilities. So 7 years ago, I didn't even know what was all that was possible and all that the dream would lead to. So to now, like, for example, a few years ago, I started pivoting a little bit to also speaking and talking to leaders and corporations about how to lead and retain and engage millennials. I didn't set out, again, to be a millennial expert. I thought it was kind of a joke, like, really a millennial expert, like an expert of 90 million people, and we've made up this term. For me, it was always kind of a joke. But then people started asking me, hey, well, can you at least talk to us? Because you seem to get 20-somethings. They're listening to you. You've been talking to them for years. You've been researching them. So that was a natural occurrence that I didn't force. That, all of a sudden, the first company that reached out was Goldman Sachs out of New York, because they had read my 101 Secrets to Your 20s book, and they thought I was a good fit to talk to their younger employees. I could not have strategically made that happen or planned that. It was just this natural occurrence. So those pieces have also kept me going, where you just don't even know right now where it's all going to take you. If you're doing good work, if you have your why, your significant why, you don't know where it's all going to lead. And you can't figure that out right now. It's like trying to figure out on that first date, what your 10-year marriage is going to look like and how many kids and mapping all that out. You just can't. You're not supposed to. You have to go down that process to start figuring out some of that, the answers that you'll figure out down the road.
I love that so much because, like you said, you see all these people today that are like digital nomads, living the life on beaches with their laptops. And it's easy to forget that things are going to unfold at their own rate and at their own pace for you. And the opportunities that you end up unlocking for yourself, you may not even know as possibilities at that time. And you said something about like going out in nature and meditating and all these different things. And, it's interesting to me that millennials got labeled as lazy because in reality, like a lot of the research the last couple of years have all said that millennials are actually work martyrs. Not only are they working 9 to 5s, they also have side hustles. Some have 2 side hustles. And I think a lot of people are forgetting that, like, take some time for yourself. You have to refill that battery because if you're trying to give from an empty tank, you're not going to be able to give anything. And then the self-defeating thoughts kick in, and then like the negative self-talk, and you lower the vibration and you end up repelling all those opportunities you're really trying to create. But there's also growth in that and a learning experience in that.
Yeah, exactly. You have to, my funny phrase is, refresh yourself before you wreck yourself. That's the throwback to the 90s, I guess. But you're right. If I'm not doing that, my work is going to suffer, my health is going to suffer, my relationships are going to suffer. So for me, it's going on a hike and praying and just getting out in nature and and honestly, and that's when my best ideas come. Mm-hmm. My best writing happens a lot of the time when I'm not writing. It's in those quiet spaces where I kind of have this mindset, and I even talk about that, having different mindsets and different kind of examples of mindsets to work on. And for me, one of those is, I call it the monk mindset. And it can feel very contrary to where we're living in now, to get away from everything, and I get so addicted to my phone and so addicted to following up and checking every social media platform and making sure that I'm responding fast and wanting to be available. But I have to kind of get that monk mindset on sometimes and be like, I got to just put everything away, go out and just sit on a rock, look at some birds and just think about life and just take some breaths. And it helps me so much to do those things.
Yeah, and I totally agree. It helps me too. And even Catherine, who we had on episode 4 of this podcast, she writes her weekly newsletters when she's at the dog park using voice memos on her phone. Because like when you're outside, when you're living your life, that's usually, I feel like, when the greatest inspiration strikes. And exactly. I realized my burnout last year where I was thinking about quitting was because I was literally holed up in my home office for like 16 hours a day, not like interacting with the world. And of course I had nothing left to say because I was just sitting in a room by myself all day.
Exactly.
And so you said also something about values earlier. And for a year, I wrote 5 articles a month for Forbes on work-life balance and constantly was interviewing top CEOs about what it is that they should be telling their millennial employees, how they found their purpose. And more times than not, it always came back to values. And one of the things I've been saying since I was 22 years old is that our 20s are about unlearning everything that society, parents, coaches have instilled on us. So how would you suggest, obviously going through this book, 101 Questions is a good way to figure out what your values are, but how would you suggest people start to kind of find their values rather than everybody else's values that have been placed on them?
Oh man, and you're right. I'm so glad that your research started uncovering that too. And that's what started coming true for me too, is just that value piece. Mm-hmm. And it was actually a mentor of mine, a guy named Ray Rude in my master's program. He was a professor. And he invited me to go out to coffee. We had coffee and he started talking to me about and asking me this, he literally asked me, what are your top 5 values? And I want you to rank them from number 1 to number 5, literally create a list. And I want you to put number 1, this is the top value and it trumps all your other values. And he kind of couched it in this, when you're making hard decisions, when you're going through your day, what are the values that are driving your decision-making process? So not even the values that you think are important, that you'd want to aspire to, or you think sound like important values. No, when it gets to the nitty-gritty of your day, what's driving your decision-making process? And even figuring out what's making you feel anxious throughout the day. Mm-hmm. And if you can look at that, and I often find that with work as well. There are people that are having anxiety with work, or they're discontent at work, or they're feeling like they're not fitting in. A lot of the time, it's not necessarily a strengths or skill issue as much as we talk about strengths or skill set. A lot of the times, I think it's a value issue that you're not having a value met. So even sometimes for me, when I look at my anxiety, again, kind of looking at some byproducts, when I'm like, why am I feeling anxious right now? Well, it's because I feel like I'm in a situation where I can't be authentic, where I can't be myself, where I feel like I'm having to be the salesman about something that I don't believe in. And I started realizing pretty quickly that authenticity was a top value of mine, that trumps so much. If I don't feel like I really believe in what I'm talking about, then I have no strength in communication talking about it. So actually my value trumps my strength. It makes my strength really a weakness. It makes it null and void. I can't use it anymore. So figuring out what those values are. So figuring out what's driving your decision-making process, and then also maybe what's making you feel anxious, and then maybe what's some value that's at war here that's not being met.
I love that so much. I think also how you said like authenticity is a value. That's something that everyone's always talking, especially today online, authenticity. But a lot of that authenticity comes with really, really knowing yourself and like embracing those low moments, which you said you had like 10 over the course of your 20s. And I've had a lot of mine too. And like, I feel like we have to remember that when we're feeling like an imposter, when we're feeling like we're worthless, when we're feeling like we're living somebody else's life, we really want to run towards those moments and like sit and figure out why and like what our soul or spirit is trying to tell us and pushing us back towards being in alignment. Because how can we truly be authentic if we don't really know ourselves, which is why I love the work that you're doing. Because if you guys are trying to figure out how to know yourself, then there's 101 questions out there to help you do it.
That's right.
Because I think a lot of times we do throw out authenticity and nobody really knows what that means anymore today.
Yeah. And Rachel, you're so right about that idea of knowing yourself and authenticity. And it's such a buzzword now that it's like, what does this even mean? Authenticity is becoming so inauthentic because we're talking about it so much. But what you said as well is really true, is that in those times of struggle and frustration, and when you're questioning and when you feel like, man, I feel like I'm a failure, all these things that I think we all tell ourselves, it's also being able to talk to others about this, because this is actually where people will connect with you the most. And I'm often saying that, we don't connect with each other through our pretend perfection. We connect through our shared struggle. And that's what authenticity is. It's opening up really about some of the stuff you're struggling with. And the beautiful thing is people will identify with that. And then you can talk about it. And then you can start figuring out, okay, what are the answers going from here? Where's the hope? How do we move forward? But because you've identified with the struggle, people will trust that a lot. So I'm even trying to tell leaders all the times at corporations that are not used to openly sharing some of their struggles. I'm like, well, you got to be able to, to talk about what you're struggling with. So even that millennials will trust you, because it builds a lot of trust as well. And so there's a lot of benefits to it, as well as just a way to deeply connect with people and to figure out yourself even more.
Yeah, I love that, because I think a lot of the times we do get caught up in living, a certain type of life and putting a smile on and like the Instagrammable captions of positive quotes and things like that. But the reality is like, the more social media has connected us, the more it's kind of separated us, unfortunately, for a lot of people. And there's a way to talk about our struggle where we can relate to one another and build each other up, that I think a lot of people see others just complaining all the time. And there's a difference between complaining and sharing a struggle, for asking for help, asking for advice, asking for empathy, and asking where to go from here. And so there's like a unique line of like constructive struggle and like the type of struggle that I think has turned so many people off of sharing their struggles, which is just negative like cycles.
Yeah, that you're right. And that's why I even ask, and I'm constantly asking myself too, am I creating more or am I complaining more? Mm-hmm. And if I feel like I'm creating more and basically trying to find solutions to the problems, trying to figure out, okay, what is the answer here? How do I move forward? Then my struggle has some forward movement. And I like the way you put it, kind of even those strategic struggles, as far as, okay, here's what I'm wrestling with, but I'm trying to get to a solution here, or I think I maybe know two things. I'm not quite sure yet, but I maybe, and I call it in the book, finding your 77% sure. I think I'm 77% sure about this, give or take a few percentage points. So I'm going to move forward here. I'm going to make a choice to move forward. And I don't know how it's going to work out, and I might fail. And that's why a common phrase I'm always thinking about and telling myself, is that the possibility for greatness and embarrassment both exist in the same space.
Oh, I love that.
If you're not willing to be embarrassed, you're probably not willing to be great. And I talked about that in my first book, and it really hit home with a lot of people, because it really hit home with me. So it's that willingness to put yourself out there, to give people that inside look, but also you're on this constant forward movement as well. So you're not just complaining to complain, but you're letting in somebody inside your struggle, you're letting them get to know you, and then you're moving forward with that. And you're being willing to embarrass yourself. And sometimes you will. And I have definitely embarrassed myself along the process, but that's part of that process.
Yeah, I've definitely embarrassed myself a time or two. But I think it ties really well into like one of the questions in the book, which is, what is fear keeping me from doing, and is it worth it? Because I think a lot of times we get caught up with being afraid of being embarrassed, being afraid of looking dumb, being afraid that people will judge us, when in reality, we have to really just kind of say, like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, if I put this up and everyone hates it, like, so what?
Yeah. If there's crickets, if nobody's responding, if I'm not getting 100 likes or whatever, who cares? And guess what? Nobody cares. Mm-hmm. Nobody really cares. And it's kind of a freeing realization that, nobody really cares if you're not getting as many likes or as much exposure as you thought you would. People aren't tracking you that hard. I often tell people, you know what the number one Instagram page that people view the most? You know what the number one Facebook page people view the most? It's their own. People look at their own pages the most. as they're trying to figure out their life, as they're trying to post their pictures. So it is watching out what I call, and I talk about this a lot, this what I call a different kind of OCD, which is obsessive comparison disorder. I think we have OCD about our obsessive comparison disorder. We're constantly comparing ourselves every single post, every single day with the images that people are portraying around us. And it can make you feel terrible. It can make you feel like you're not making progress. But we're all kind of strategically portraying these images that might not exactly be the truth. And so we have to be careful with that obsessive comparison disorder. Yes, have mentors, have people you're looking up to that are motivating you, but don't keep beating yourself over the head with everybody's success that might not be as successful as it looks. They're just making it look really great with the image that they're portraying online.
Yeah, I heard you say on my friend Tayo's podcast, As Told by Nomads.
Yeah, Tayo's great.
He's amazing. We're all struggling, and we're struggling to appear like we aren't struggling. And when you said that, I was just like, oh, that's so true. If only more people could begin looking at their Instagram or Facebook feeds as a measure of growth rather than not enough, rather than lack. We burn and churn through so many accomplishments today. Millennials, we have higher rents, we have lower pay than our past generations, and we forget to kind of celebrate that, even if we are eating ramen 5 nights a week, hey, we're not homeless. And with the way that the economy was for so many that came into the workforce in 2007, 2008, the Great Recession, that's a big win. And sure, it's not where they may have thought their lives would end up and be. It's still something to look back on and say, hey, I still had fun then. I still had friends then. I still was getting to know myself. And I think as far as our 20s go, that's all we can really hope for, to just have a better understanding of who we are and what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. And that's why I say success in your 20s is more about setting the table than enjoying the feast. And it's exactly what you just touched on there. It's that you're setting the table. Your 20s and really your 30s too aren't about them going as planned, but how you adapt, grow, and change when it doesn't go as planned. And that's, again, that growth factor that you're putting the seeds in the ground and you're watering them day after day. And that's why I'm even telling people, don't chase your dreams, grow your dreams. Literally put them in the ground, get them rooted in something, and then water them and feed them every day. Because that's what's going to take: consistency, humility, some of these age-old things, that's still the key to doing successful work. But you're right, we have to celebrate along the way. And you might have been listening into my conversation with my wife earlier this week. I don't know if you were, Rachel, but
I wasn't. Sorry.
This is good because I would have to call the cops if you were. But
I have been known to stalk.
She was even she was kind of lecturing me. She was kind of laying it down for me a little bit because I just had my third book come out last week, and I was stressed out. And probably some fear in there, how is it going to go? How's the launch going to go? All these things. And she had to just sit me down and go, Paul, you have to enjoy this. Enjoy this. If you don't enjoy it, what's this worth? And it's going to show up in your work too. You're going to be fearful and you're going to be writing messages that aren't helpful. How do you serve people and enjoy what you're doing? Look back at how far we've come. This is our third book. That's awesome. But again, it doesn't ever stop. I think we all think if I get to that kind of make it moment, when you hit your 5-year plan, Rachel, and you get that book deal, when that thing happens that we're kind of dreaming for, I think we kind of imagine that, oh, this is how it's going to feel. And I'm going to feel like I've arrived. I'm going to feel like I've accomplished what I set out to do. I think there's some of that for us, but I think you're right. For millennials that are driven, especially, I think there's always that, okay, yeah, but what's next? Or, yeah, that was good, but the view isn't as great as I thought it would be. Or, or yeah, I'm married, but marriage isn't as perfect as I thought it would be. It's actually kind of a lot of work, all these things, all these images of when we felt like we were going to obtain something. And for me, let me just tell you, this is my third book, and there's still so much of that gosh, look at other people's books that are doing better, or, all these different things that we still play the same game. So you're right. We have to celebrate, these triumphs in our life, these kind of pivotal plot points in our life when things went really well. and celebrate those and then incorporate that more into our future story as well.
Yeah. Cause I mean, I know I've talked to so many people over the year. I'm 28 now, over this last 8 years in my 20s. And so often I look at them and I'm like, wow, look at, you've done so many things. Like you're so like not accomplished, because I know there's so many more places you want to go, but like there's so many things, milestones to celebrate. And I just see how many of us just blow by them and we forget about them. And we go right back into that story of not enough, not enough, not enough. And so how have you kind of worked through those feelings of not enough, or, you know, the dream not turning out and feeling exactly how you hoped it was going to feel or fantasized it was going to feel?
Man, that's a great question. You know, I think this is an everyday kind of thing. You know, it kind of has to become an everyday where you start getting some good habits and you start really just focusing on writing your own story instead of trying to ghostwrite other people's stories. You know, basically being that kind of behind the scenes writer, that you're writing other people's stories and you're trying to be more like this person and make sure that you're reaching all these milestones like this person is, and just focusing in on what I call your signature sauce. You know, that's kind of my fun metaphor that I put on the unique flavor that everybody brings. You know, and it's like you're that master chef in the kitchen and you're bringing all these ingredients together that only you have in these different amounts, and you're putting them together and you're trying to figure out that flavor that you offer to the world. And the more that you focus in on your signature sauce, on the flavor that you're bringing, well, gosh, then you can celebrate other people's successes. You know, the other restaurants that are doing great, you know, keep it in the chef terms. You're like, yeah, go for it. And you start learning some tricks from them, and you start comparing notes and you build each other up, you know, because you're not focused on this competition of who's doing better than whom. You're more just focused on, how do I make the flavor of my sauce that much better? And it's that peace to it. You know, it's that being just at peace with your signature sauce.
And I love that so much. You know, I think a lot of the times we don't necessarily look back on history. And so listeners might know, but I've been working with a shaman this year. And so one of the things that, you know, he's taught us, shamans used to be the kind of like the bridge between the physical world and the spirit world back when we all lived in tribes, you know, I don't even know history that well. What was that, like hundreds of years ago, centuries ago? I'm not even sure what.
I don't know my shaman history very well. I'm sorry.
No, it's like quantum reality, is they're all happening at the same time. So I don't know how to like quantify it in a linear path. But back when we had tribes, and essentially with a tribe, every person in that tribe was there to be an expert in their own way. They all had that special signature sauce, as you say, that they're there to contribute to elevate the greater good of this community moving forward and advancement of humanity, society, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, millennials, like, we get teased a lot because we were all told that we're unique and special. And that led to a lot of people feeling like they just didn't get what they thought they should deserve when they entered the workforce or whatever. And I think that, you know, the older generations weren't wrong in telling us that we were unique and special. We just then tried to fit into somebody else's box because we forgot that signature sauce. We forgot that we're all here to be an expert in our own way that is going to move us forward as a society, as a culture. And we just have to go about like falling down a lot to go through those periods of growth to find what that's going to be.
Exactly. You know, and I think that's, again, the rub. That's where it happens. That's when your uniqueness comes to play, is through the setbacks and failures and struggles and challenges, because that's when it's being refined and that's when it's being honed. And that's when you're learning more about yourself, you know, and it's even when I say that, you know, all explorers have to get lost. You have to get lost if you're going to explore. And when you get off the path and you get lost, man, your senses just come way more alive, don't they? I mean, when you're lost, if you're literally lost in the mountains, you know, I live in Colorado, and I've been there a few times where I've been lost in the Rocky Mountains where I'm like, I don't know where the trail is. I don't know where I'm going. Man, your senses come alive because it's becoming a little bit more life and death. You know, there's a lot riding on you figuring out where to go. And so it's okay for us to feel lost at times, But explorers, they get lost on purpose with purpose. So it's kind of this strategic lostness to it. And they have some guides with them, showing them the way, kind of giving them some ideas. They're not just out there by themselves. And so I think that is kind of that metaphor of our 20s. It's that, again, signature sauce. You're going to be that chef in the kitchen. You're going to get lost in the kitchen. Literally, you'll still be there, but you'll get lost as far as what to do next. But that's where that uniqueness is going to be honed. And I think that's sometimes where millennials get knocked, is we think we're going to display the uniqueness from day one. Well, no, I think this is a lifetime thing. And it's something that we keep changing by keep becoming more of ourselves. We keep changing by becoming more of ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's a lifelong process.
Totally. And so I feel like you've already answered this next question so many ways, but maybe you want to add on to it. What do you want to remind millennials of to stop being so hard on themselves?
Yeah, gosh, I think it's what we've even touched on and you've touched on, this idea that, one, you're not alone. You're not alone in feelings of struggle or frustration or feeling like you haven't made it or whatever it might be. The amount of emails that I've received over the years that has said, I feel so alone in this. There's so many of us out there. So first, you're not alone. And then again, you are enough. Your worth isn't based, again, on your perceived success at this given moment. Because success and failure, the ebbs and flows of that are going to happen daily. So I love this quote by Mother Teresa. It's kind of a guiding post for me. And she said, if you're truly humble, nothing will disgrace you or change you, neither praise nor disgrace, because you know who you are. And so it's that idea of even when the waves of success comes or the waves of failure come, if you know who you are, it's not going to change you. You're going to say, okay, that's great. Let me keep doing my thing. And for any of us right now that needs to hear that, keep doing your thing. It's going to be a process and you're not going to know everything 100%. But again, find your 77% sure. Know that you're not alone on this journey. Reach out to people like me and Rachel if you need some encouragement or advice or inspiration along the way. We're guides that are helping you. And let's keep walking forward together and let's do this together. And I think that's a powerful place to operate from.
Definitely. And I think it's also, what you just said it really brought something up for me. I had a mini meltdown this past weekend. I feel like now you were listening to my conversation with my husband, where it was kind of like, it's not about like, success is such a funny thing where it's not about the number of books you have published, the number of Instagram followers, the amount of money in the bank account. For me, success is about that lasting change, a positive impact on humanity. And when we look back on so many of our great leaders, Martin Luther King died before ever seeing what he impacted for change. And even still, over 50 years later, that change where we're all equal is still not even in full effect yet. And so it's like you're starting a ripple effect with the message that you're putting out into the world now that you may not even be alive to see the full impact of how it gets passed from generation to generation and just in advancing humanity and advancing love and advancing community where we're all kind of free to be that unique individual with our signature sauce, adding to the elevation of our tribe. Success is such a funny thing where, it helps to know our values and things like that. But just know that, like, I don't know, this is where I have my meltdowns over is like, the expansiveness of life and like, what is the impact for the future? So I guess that leads me to a final question for you, because now we know what I'm confused about. What are you confused about?
Oh, man. I still am asking questions about my own business. Life as an entrepreneur is not straightforward. I often say, about our 20s and 30s in general, but there's no syllabus to this.
How nice would that be?
Yeah, and some people will try to give you the online course of here's the syllabus. And a lot of that is helpful. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of helpful guides out there. But there's not going to be a syllabus for you figuring out what your signature sauce is. And it's another quote from Seth Godin, who's, if you know me, you know that I love reading Seth Godin's work. And it's this quote from him that it's the There's no, it's really hard to write a chef book. It's easy to write a cookbook with instructions to follow, but really hard to write a chef book.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're all doing. We're writing this chef book. And for me, there's going to be a lot of questions in that because I don't know necessarily what's going to be all on that next page. I don't have it all figured out. But if I stay in that place of humility and hard work and creativity and getting that monk mindset going where I'm praying and going on walks, if I have this mixture going on, well, hopefully what's going to be on the next page is going to be pretty good. And then some of it maybe won't last. And then it won't follow through on the next page after that. And that's okay. That's part of the process. So for everybody out there, keep writing your chef book. And it's your chef book. And get a lot of guides to help you along the way. Don't do it by yourself. But in the end, it's your signature sauce. And the world really needs it. You're right. And that's why I ask in the book, my new book, the 101 Questions book, who will you not be able to help if you give up now? And that was a real question for me because I almost gave up so many times. And who will you not be able to help if you give up now? Because there's real people out there that need your signature sauce, that need the substance you bring. And if you give up now, gosh, you're not going to help them. And they need you. So keep going.
Oh, I love that. On that note, I just want to thank you so much for your time, your work, your message, everything that you do, Paul. I know it helps me. I know it helps a lot of the other confused millennials out there too.
Well, thank you, Rachel. It's been so much fun getting to know you over the years, and congrats on your success. And as you continue to dive deep into what does that success look like for you and celebrate that success, we all need to hear our own advice, right? I need to hear my own advice, which is why I'm giving it. For all of us listening, we need to hear our own advice sometimes. And for me, that's definitely true. So I'm so glad to know you, and thank you for having me on your podcast.
Wow. Thank you so much for your time, Paul. I know our conversation really got me thinking, and I'm sure it got a lot of you guys listening thinking too. For me, it really just reinforced the idea that life is about the journey, not just the destination. And all of these moments where we're slipping up, feeling stagnant, falling, that's where the beauty lies. That's where the soul growth lies. And I am just so excited to keep going through this book. How I'm personally going to be going through it, because it's 101 questions, is each day I'm sitting down with one of the questions as kind of a writing prompt and really allowing me to go through it kind of like a journal, if you will. So I know it can be really overwhelming to sit down and ask yourself 101 questions sometimes. So definitely take it one piece at a time, because I think it's such a good resource in really uncovering your soul's purpose in this life. So with that, I will leave links for you guys to shop his latest book, as well as 101 Secrets for Your 20s in the show notes. And as always, if you guys could do me a huge, huge favor, subscribe, rate and review, tell your friends about this podcast. I would so appreciate it. And if you send me a screenshot of your review to rachel@theconfusedmillennial.com, you'll be entered in the current giveaway. It's a ton of spring goodies to start the season off right, worth over $275. And I will talk to you guys next week. Thank you so much for spending this time with me.